Have you ever stopped to wonder if perhaps you've never truly made a decision that was entirely your own? What if I told you that your mind has been programmed since childhood to obey invisible commands, and that most of your fears, blocks, and limitations were installed like software inside your brain? The truth is unsettling. Brainwashing works, even when you know you're being manipulated. Propaganda works, placebo works. And the most powerful part, you can use those same techniques to reprogram yourself and create any reality you want. Today, you're going to discover how to do this in a conscious, strategic, and transformative way. This video is the beginning of your mental rebirth. Comment below, "I'm in control of my mind and my reality." That phrase is your anchor. It activates a new vibration within you and opens the doors to everything that's about to unfold. To understand how brainwashing can be used in a positive way, to free rather than to control, we need to look at one of the boldest and most overlooked minds of the 20th century, Jacobo Grinberg. A Mexican neuroscientist, psychologist, and researcher, Grinberg dedicated his life to studying human consciousness, the structure of reality, and how the mind shapes the world we perceive. His work, blending science, spirituality, and quantum physics, suggests that reality is not something fixed, but rather a projection of our neuronal field, that is, the mental content we carry. Grinberg claimed that what we think, feel, and repeat intensely is literally imprinted on the fabric of the universe. This means that if you are stuck in cycles of scarcity, fear, or stagnation, it's not the world that needs to change. It's your mental field that needs to be reprogrammed. And here lies the great secret, the technique of self-brainwashing, not as external control, but as a tool of liberation. If systems already know how to program you to consume, obey, and fear, then you can also use that same code to rewrite your identity, your beliefs, and your vibration. Have you noticed that even when you know you're being manipulated, it still affects you? Even when you recognize a sales trick, you click. Even knowing it's just an ad, you consider buying. That isn't weakness, it's neuroscience. The human brain has primitive mechanisms that operate beyond conscious logic, and that's where the danger lies, and also where the liberation begins. The human mind responds to repetitive stimuli, intense emotions, and visual and auditory patterns. That's why TV commercials use jingles, politicians repeat slogans, and short videos on social media use fast music, flashing lights, and impactful phrases. When the brain is repeatedly exposed to these elements, it enters a receptive state, even if you know what's happening. Rationalization doesn't stop programming. It simply observes while the subconscious absorbs. People trained in manipulation techniques know this, and here's the key. You can be aware that you're being influenced and still be influenced. That's how it worked with soldiers in the army, as in the example mentioned earlier. They knew they were being pushed to their emotional limits on purpose. They knew it was all part of a strategy of breaking and rebuilding. And yet, it still worked. Why? Because when the brain is in a state of stress, fear, or euphoria, it stops analyzing and starts obeying. This principle is widely used by systems, brands, governments, social networks, and even popular culture. And the scariest part, brainwashing doesn't need to be sophisticated. All it takes is a repeated pattern at vulnerable moments, like right before sleep or when you're tired, anxious, or distracted. But here's the turning point. This technique doesn't have to be a tool of domination. It can be a tool of liberation. When you understand how the mind responds to repetition, emotions, and stimuli, you can start using it in your favor. You can program your brain with positive affirmations, with images of success, with phrases that activate your best self. And even if part of you says, this is just placebo, it will still work. Studies show that the placebo effect, when you believe something will work even while knowing it's false, still produces real effects in the body and mind. Expectation shapes perception, and perception shapes reality. Therefore, you can use the same logic behind external manipulation to become the author of your own mental programming. The secret lies in becoming aware of what enters your mind every day, because everything repeated, reinforced emotionally and visually, becomes installed as truth, even if it's a lie. And in the same way, if you start today to repeat what you want to live with emotion, intention, and consistency, your brain will obey, even knowing you're the one creating it. For many, talking about mind manipulation sounds like conspiracy theory. But when you know the history of Project MK Ultra, the line between fiction and reality disappears. MK Ultra was a real experiment conducted by the CIA from the 1950s onward, with the declared goal of discovering how to control the human mind. And the way it was done is, at the very least, disturbing. For years, doctors, psychiatrists, universities, and entire institutions participated in experiments involving hypnosis, sleep deprivation, electric shocks, hallucinogenic drugs like LSD, and emotional manipulation to break the minds of innocent individuals. Children, psychiatric patients, soldiers, and even ordinary people were exposed to brainwashing techniques without knowing it. They thought they were being treated, but they were being tested. The objective was clear: to discover how to make someone completely obedient, how to erase memories, how to install new identities, how to turn a human being into a machine that carries out orders without question. And the most disturbing part is that most of the project's documents were destroyed by the CIA itself in 1973. Proving just how deep and dark this experiment really was. But some evidence survived, and it shows that the human brain can indeed be reprogrammed when exposed to certain patterns of stress, repetition, and conditioning, especially during childhood, when the brain is in theta waves, a natural state of hypnosis. That's exactly where many realized, if it's possible to program a young mind with specific stimuli and suggestions, then the entire culture surrounding a child can be shaping who they will become for the rest of their life. And this didn't stay in laboratories. The findings of MK Ultra were absorbed by media, advertising, the educational system, and entertainment. Commercials began to use the same techniques of repetition and emotion. Newspaper headlines started exploiting fear to hold attention. Entertainment content was designed to be passively consumed, while installing beliefs, values, and behaviors desired by the system. Today, instead of LSD, we have dopamine generated by infinite scrolling on social media. Instead of direct hypnosis, we have songs with subliminal repetition. Instead of lab-based manipulation, we have algorithms that decide what you see, what you feel, and even what you believe. But if all this works to imprison, then it also works to set you free. If the mind can be shaped by repetition, it can also be reshaped by new repetition chosen by you. The same brain that was conditioned into fear and limitation can be reconditioned into abundance, confidence, and freedom. And here is the most important point. You no longer need to be a victim of invisible systems. Now that you know the game, you can play by your own rules. If there's anyone who took the idea of mental reprogramming to both a scientific and spiritual level, it was Jacobo Grinberg. He not only investigated how the mind influences reality, he proposed that the mind is the very structure that defines what we call reality. For Grinberg, the world we perceive with our eyes is not objective, fixed, or independent. Everything we see, feel, and live is a projection of our inner neuronal field. According to him, the human brain is not just a receiver of information, it is a coder of reality. And the code it uses to project the outer world comes from the content we carry inside, our beliefs, our emotional patterns, our recurring thoughts. In other words, you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. Grinberg drew inspiration from spiritual traditions, such as Mexican shamanism, as well as principles of quantum physics. He stated that there exists a unified field of information that interacts with our consciousness, which he called the neuronal field. This field is like a mirror that faithfully reflects everything you hold inside. This means that if your field is loaded with scarcity, fear, doubt, or insecurity, the world around you will respond with situations that reinforce those exact states. And this is where theory becomes practice. If reality is shaped by the mind, then changing reality begins with changing the mind. It's not enough to want more money, more confidence, more freedom. You need to carry within you the vibration that matches those experiences. Grinberg invites us to move away from the linear logic that something must change outside before we change inside, and teaches the opposite. True change begins within and radiates outward. This is the foundation behind self-brainwashing. When you consciously choose what to repeat, what to visualize, what to feel every day, you're rewriting the codes of your neuronal field. You're dissolving the old program, the old you, and installing a new inner structure. More prosperous, more secure, more connected. Grinberg said that few people would realize this because the illusion of external reality is very convincing. But those who awakened to this knowledge and applied it with discipline would literally be able to bend reality. They would no longer be at the mercy of facts, but co-creating their experience with the universe. You are not trapped in your current life. You are only trapped in the codes that were installed in your mental field, and if you change the code, the world around you will change with it. That is the true power behind mental reprogramming. Now that you understand how the mind is programmable and how that programming shapes your reality, it's time to flip the game. Instead of being programmed, you're going to start programming yourself consciously. This practice has a direct and unapologetic name: self-brainwashing. Not in the negative sense, but as an intentional process of clearing out the mental junk imposed on you and replacing it with codes that build your most powerful version. And here's the truth few dare to say: even when you know it's programming, it still works. You can repeat a phrase in front of the mirror, and even if a skeptical side of you whispers, "This is just placebo," it will have an effect. Because the brain doesn't clearly distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. It just responds to repetition, emotion, and intention. So how do you start? Choose a new identity. Every transformation begins with clarity. Ask yourself, who do I want to be? Not what do I want to have, but who? A leader, an entrepreneur, a magnetic person, confident, prosperous? Define that identity with precision, as if you were writing the script for a character. Create a power phrase. The mind needs simple, direct commands. Something like, "I am extremely confident and everything flows in my favor. My presence inspires power, security, and prosperity. Everything I desire is already coming toward me now." Always use the present tense. Never say, "I will be," but "I am." Daily repetition, elevated emotional state. Repeating mechanically is not enough. You need to feel. Use the moment before sleep, the hypnagogic state, and right after waking, when the mind is still free of external stimuli. Breathe deeply, repeat the phrase, and feel as if it's true now. Imagine scenes, sensations, and allow yourself to believe even for a few seconds. Visualization as reinforcement. Close your eyes and see your new identity living the perfect day. How do they speak? How do they dress? How do they move? The brain begins creating new neural connections based on those images. Over time, these visualizations become so familiar that your body begins to act according to them. Guard what enters. Self-brainwashing doesn't work if you continue intoxicating yourself with music that reinforces sadness, content that activates fear, and social media that promotes comparison and scarcity. You need to protect your mental field as if it were a sacred temple. And remember, This isn't a one-day practice, it's a daily ritual of rebuilding your mind. Each repetition, each visualization, each conscious choice is clearing old codes and installing a new operating system. You don't need to believe 100% from the start, just practice, because the brain doesn't demand faith, it demands repetition. Before becoming who you want to be, you must release who you were taught to be. Self-brainwashing doesn't begin by installing new thoughts, but by removing the old ones, the ones planted in you without your consent. Those thoughts are not yours. They were put there by systems, institutions, family, traumatic experiences, and above all, unconscious repetition. Since childhood, you may have heard phrases like, "Money isn't for everyone. You need permission for everything. Don't dream too big. Life is just hard." Those phrases, repeated by adults you trusted, were absorbed by your brain in theta state, the same state Jacobo Grinberg studied as the most receptive to mental programming. In other words, you were hypnotized as a child, and now, as an adult, you carry those voices as if they were your own. But they are not. Unlearning is the most liberating act of life. It's looking inward and asking, is this belief true or just something I was taught? And most of the answers will surprise you. You'll realize that much of what you believe about yourself, about life, about what's possible or not, was never your choice. It was emotional and mental inheritance from others. The cleaning process begins with identification. Take pen and paper and write, what do I believe about money? What do I think about myself? What have I learned about success? Do I truly believe I can prosper? Then, question each item, like an investigator of your own mind. Ask, is this fact or just a conditioned thought? This exercise, simple at first glance, has the power to uninstall beliefs that have sabotaged your life for decades. But cleansing isn't enough. You must replace. The brain doesn't accept vacuums. It needs a new code to put in place. That's why you must immediately insert opposite, more powerful, expansive phrases. For example, from "I'll never earn well" to "I am capable of creating wealth with my value." From "I'm not good enough" to "I am complete, capable, and constantly evolving." The brain needs to repeat these new ideas until it accepts them as normal. It's like wiping a hard drive and installing a new operating system. Remember, you weren't born limited, you were taught to be. And everything that's learned can be unlearned. Yes, you can be rewritten, not by others, but by yourself. You are not your beliefs. You are the one who chooses which beliefs to keep alive. If you understand that your mind is a programmable system, then it's time to act as your own hacker. Yes, you can literally hack into your own mental patterns, discover where the blocks are, and install more effective codes, like reconfiguring software to run with better performance. Most people wait for motivation to come from outside, praise, validation, instant results. But the real power lies in creating internal reward systems, small programs that make your brain feel good every time you perform a behavior aligned with your new identity. Think about how digital addiction works. Social media uses sounds, notifications, bright colors, and dopamine to keep you hooked. The brain learns that by pulling the screen down and seeing something new, it's rewarded. Dopamine is released and the cycle repeats. You can use this same principle to drive yourself forward, not to trap yourself. For example, every time you perform an action aligned with your ideal version, like reading a book, recording a video, studying something that will enrich you, create an emotional reward ritual. It could be an empowering song, a victory thought, a small celebration. The brain doesn't know the difference between big achievements and small victories. What matters is the emotion attached. In addition, you can condition your body to move even when the mind resists. How? By setting physical triggers. Example, whenever you feel lazy, count backwards. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. This is the famous action trigger studied by neuroscientists like Mel Robbins. It tricks the limbic system and moves the body before the inner saboteur steps in. Another powerful tool is using identity as a compass. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like it?" ask, "Is this something my new version would do?" When the answer is yes, you act, regardless of your mood in the moment. This way, you stop depending on motivation and start operating by identity alignment. This creates consistency, and consistency is what truly reprograms the brain. You can also use reverse visualization. Imagine what will happen if you do nothing, if you keep repeating the same habits. See the future that will be built by your lazy version. This technique creates anticipatory pain, and the brain wants to avoid pain. So, you move. In the end, here's the big shift. No one is coming to save you. You are the programmer, the user, and the final product. If you want to change your life, you must take on this role of spiritual hacker, internal motivator, and architect of your new mind. You are the machine, but you are also the code. And from now on, it is you who writes the next line. Now that you know how brainwashing works, and more importantly, how to use it in your favor, it's time to make the most important decision of your life, to take control of your mind. Don't wait for permission, motivation, or a sign from the universe. You already know that whoever programs your mind programs your reality, and if you don't do it, someone else will. Today, you learned how to clear limiting beliefs, how to see yourself as a new identity, how to use triggers, emotions, and repetition to rewrite your mental field. But none of this has value if you don't apply it. That's why your challenge starts now. For 7 days straight, choose your new identity. Repeat your affirmation every night before bed. Visualize your future as if you were already living it. And watch the signs appear. Come back here later to tell me what happened. Leave your comment saying, "I am the programmer of my mind and my reality." Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and share this video with someone who needs to wake up. The revolution begins within. And now you have the tools to awaken.